In the farthest corner of the galaxy, hidden behind swirling clouds of cosmic dust, lay a small planet called Luminara. It was a place of wonder, where rivers sparkled like liquid diamonds and trees grew tall with leaves that shimmered in every color imaginable. The air itself seemed alive, humming softly as if the planet were singing its own song. But despite its beauty, Luminara held a secret sadness deep within its heart, a sadness tied to its youngest ruler, Princess Lyra. Lyra was no ordinary princess. She stood only 2 feet tall, her delicate frame wrapped in skin that gleamed like polished silver under the light of Luminara's twin suns. Her eyes were large and luminous, glowing faintly in hues of blue and violet, giving her an otherworldly appearance. To those who truly knew her, Lyra was kind, clever, and fiercely determined. Yet to most outsiders she was seen as weak because of her size, and this perception had shaped much of her life. From the moment she came of age, suitors from across the galaxy began arriving at the royal palace, hoping to win her hand in marriage. They came for many reasons. Some sought power, others wealth, and a few claimed they wished to unite their worlds with Luminara's. At first, Lyra welcomed them with open arms, eager to meet someone who might see past her tiny stature and recognize her worth. But time and again she faced rejection. When the first suitor arrived, a burly warrior named Zarn from the volcanic planet Pyros, he took one look at Lyra and laughed. "This is your princess," he said, turning to King Varric, Lyra's father. "She's barely bigger than my sword. How can she lead a kingdom, let alone bear strong heirs?" His words stung, but Lyra tried not to show it. She greeted him politely, offering tea brewed from Luminara's rare golden flowers. Zarn barely touched it, his gaze fixed instead on the jewels adorning the palace walls. When he left empty-handed, Lyra told herself it didn't matter. There would be others. But the next suitor wasn't any better. Prince Kalos of the aquatic world Aquarian arrived dressed in flowing robes adorned with seashells. He bowed low before Lyra, his movements graceful and deliberate. For a moment she dared to hope he might be different. That hope vanished quickly when he asked, "Tell me, princess, do you even have the strength to hold a scepter, let alone rule a people?" His tone was mocking, and though Lyra clenched her fists beneath the table, she forced a smile and dismissed him with as much dignity as she could muster. The rejections piled up over the years. Some suitors left without saying a word, their faces twisted in disappointment. Others made cruel jokes about her size, comparing her to children or pets. Each insult cut deeper than the last, chipping away at Lyra's confidence until she began to doubt herself. Was she truly unfit to rule? Did her size make her less capable, less worthy? These thoughts haunted her during sleepless nights, when the hum of the planet outside her window felt more like a taunt than a lullaby. King Varric watched his daughter grow quieter with each passing year. Once vibrant and full of laughter, Lyra now spent most of her days locked away in the library, reading ancient texts and studying maps of distant stars. He worried for her, not just as a king concerned for the future of his kingdom, but as a father who loved his child deeply. Tradition dictated that Lyra must marry before ascending the throne, yet no suitor had ever stayed long enough to see her true qualities. Varric knew Lyra possessed a sharp mind, a compassionate heart, and an unshakable sense of justice. Why couldn't anyone else see that? One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting the palace in shades of orange and pink, Varric sat alone in his observatory. The room was filled with strange devices designed to peer into the vastness of space. Through one of these instruments, he gazed at a distant blue-green planet known as Earth. Humans fascinated him. Unlike many species in the galaxy, they lacked advanced technology and extraordinary physical abilities. Yet they thrived, driven by curiosity and resilience. As Varric adjusted the lens, he spotted a figure walking through a field of golden crops. The man moved with purpose, his broad shoulders cutting a striking silhouette against the setting sun. Something about him caught Varric's attention. Perhaps it was the way he paused to help a fallen bird back onto its feet, or the gentle smile he gave to a child running toward him. Whoever this human was, he radiated kindness and strength. Inspiration struck Varric like a bolt of lightning. What if this man could be the answer to Lyra's loneliness? What if someone so different from the usual suitors could finally see Lyra for who she truly was? With renewed determination, Varric composed a message to Earth, inviting the stranger to visit Luminara. He signed it simply, "A friend among the stars." Weeks passed before a response arrived. The human identified himself as Ethan Harper, a farmer from a quiet town nestled between rolling hills and endless fields. His reply was humble yet warm, expressing gratitude for the invitation and curiosity about Luminara. Reading his words, Varric felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this man, with his simple life and open heart, could break the cycle of rejection that had plagued Lyra for so long. As preparations began for Ethan's arrival, Lyra remained unaware of her father's plan. She continued her solitary routine, spending hours poring over books and avoiding the courtiers who whispered about her behind closed doors. Sometimes she climbed to the highest tower of the palace, gazing out at the stars scattered across the night sky. Out there, beyond the boundaries of Luminara, lay countless worlds teeming with life. Did anyone out there understand what it meant to feel small yet strong, fragile yet resilient? Or was she destined to carry this burden alone forever? Little did Lyra know change was already on its way. A stranger from another world was coming, a man who might finally see her not as a tiny alien princess, but as a person worthy of love and respect. Ethan Harper stood on the edge of his farm, staring at the sky. The invitation from Luminara had arrived in a flash of light, delivered by a small, hovering orb that spoke in a voice both melodic and strange. At first, Ethan thought it was some kind of prank or a dream brought on by too much sun. But the orb persisted, explaining that he had been chosen to visit a distant planet as part of a cultural exchange. It sounded impossible, yet Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was an opportunity he couldn't pass up. He wasn't a man who craved adventure. Life on his quiet farm suited him just fine. He woke with the sunrise, tended to his crops, and spent his evenings reading by the fire. People in town often remarked on how dependable he was, always willing to lend a hand, whether it was fixing a fence or helping a neighbor carry in their harvest. Ethan didn't think of himself as special. He simply believed in doing what was right. That belief, more than anything else, convinced him to accept the invitation. If nothing else, he reasoned, it would make for a good story to tell his grandchildren someday. The journey to Luminara was unlike anything Ethan had ever experienced. The orb guided him to a clearing where a sleek silver ship descended silently from the heavens. Inside, the walls shimmered like liquid metal and the air smelled faintly of flowers. Ethan felt a mix of awe and unease as the ship lifted off, leaving Earth far behind. Through a window he watched as stars streaked past, blurring into streaks of light. Hours, or maybe days later, the ship slowed, and Ethan caught his first glimpse of Luminara. The planet was breathtaking. Rivers glowed softly, winding through fields of grass that sparkled like gemstones. Towering spires made of crystal rose from the ground, catching the light of twin suns and scattering rainbows across the landscape. As the ship landed, Ethan stepped out, shielding his eyes from the brilliance around him. A group of aliens awaited him, their forms tall and elegant, their skin shimmering in shades of gold and green. They greeted him warmly, though their expressions held a hint of curiosity. Ethan realized he must look as strange to them as they did to him. One of the aliens, taller than the rest and adorned with intricate jewelry, approached Ethan. "Welcome to Luminara," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "I am King Varric. We are honored by your presence." Ethan bowed awkwardly, unsure of the proper etiquette. "Thank you for having me," he replied, his voice steady despite his nerves. "It's quite a place you've got here." Varric smiled, though his eyes seemed to weigh Ethan carefully. "Come. There is someone I wish you to meet." He led Ethan through the palace gates, which opened onto a courtyard filled with fountains and blooming flowers. Everywhere Ethan looked, people stared at him. Some whispered behind their hands while others openly gawked. Ethan tried not to let it bother him, but he couldn't help feeling like an outsider. They entered a grand hall, its ceiling painted with scenes of stars and planets. At the center of the room stood a small figure dressed in flowing robes that shimmered like moonlight. Ethan blinked, unsure if his eyes were playing tricks on him. The figure was tiny, no taller than a child, yet she carried herself with a grace that commanded attention. Her silver skin gleamed softly, and her glowing eyes met his with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Ethan Harper," Varric said, gesturing toward the figure. "This is my daughter, Princess Lyra." Lyra stepped forward, her movements slow and deliberate. Up close, Ethan could see the delicate features of her face and the faint glow of her skin. She tilted her head slightly, studying him as if trying to decide whether he posed a threat. Ethan smiled, hoping to put her at ease. "It's nice to meet you, Princess Lyra," he said, bowing again. His height made the gesture comical, and Lyra's lips twitched as if she were suppressing a smile. "Welcome to Luminara, Ethan," she said, her voice soft but clear. "I hope your journey was pleasant." "It was," Ethan replied. "Your planet is incredible. I've never seen anything like it." Lyra nodded, though her expression remained guarded. "Most visitors find it beautiful," she said, "though not all choose to stay." Ethan frowned, sensing there was more to her words than met the ear. Before he could respond, Varric clapped his hands together. "Let us show you the palace," he said, steering Ethan toward a set of double doors. "There is much to see, and I'm sure you have questions." As they toured the palace, Ethan marveled at its beauty. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, and the floors gleamed as if polished by starlight. Servants moved quietly through the halls, their footsteps barely making a sound. Despite the grandeur, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The courtiers they passed seemed polite enough, but their smiles didn't quite reach their eyes. And Lyra, though courteous, kept her distance, as if afraid to get too close. That evening, a feast was held in Ethan's honor. The banquet hall was filled with music and laughter, though Ethan noticed Lyra sat apart from the crowd, watching silently as others danced and ate. He excused himself from a conversation with one of the nobles and approached her. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, gesturing to the empty seat beside her. Lyra hesitated before nodding. "Of course," she said, shifting slightly to make room. Ethan sat down, leaning back in his chair. "So," he began, "what do you think of Earth? I mean, based on what little I've told you." Lyra tilted her head, considering the question. "It sounds simple," she said finally, "but also peaceful. Here everything is expected to be grand and perfect. Sometimes I wonder what it would be like to live somewhere quieter." Ethan chuckled. "Trust me, it has its own challenges, but yeah, it's pretty peaceful, especially compared to all this." He gestured to the bustling hall around them. Lyra smiled faintly, and for the first time Ethan saw a flicker of warmth in her eyes. "You're different from the others," she said softly. "Most visitors don't take the time to ask questions. They only care about wealth or power." "Well, I'm not here for either of those things," Ethan replied honestly. "I came because your father invited me and because I was curious. Besides, I think it's important to understand people before judging them." Lyra looked at him, then really looked at him, and Ethan saw something shift in her expression. For the first time since his arrival, he felt like he might actually belong here, not because of his size or strength, but because of the way he treated others. And as the night wore on, Ethan found himself wondering if maybe, just maybe, his journey to Luminara wasn't just about seeing a new world. Perhaps it was about finding a connection that transcended galaxies. The next morning, Ethan woke to the sound of birdsong drifting through his window. The air smelled sweet, like flowers blooming in the early light. He stretched and sat up, still marveling at how different everything felt here on Luminara. As he dressed, a servant arrived with breakfast, a plate of fruits that shimmered faintly and tasted sweeter than anything Ethan had ever eaten. After eating, He wandered out into the palace gardens where he found Lyra sitting on a bench beneath a tree whose leaves sparkled like emeralds. "Good morning," Ethan said as he approached. "Am I interrupting?" Lyra shook her head, gesturing for him to sit beside her. "Not at all, I was just thinking." "About what?" Ethan asked, settling onto the bench. "About you," she admitted, her cheeks tinting slightly. "You're not like anyone else who's come here. Most suitors only care about power or wealth. But you seem interested in our world and in me, for different reasons." Ethan smiled. "Well, I figure there's no point in coming all this way if I'm not going to learn something new. Besides, it's hard not to be curious when everything around here is so beautiful." Lyra looked down at her hands, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think beauty matters more than strength? Most people here do. They see my size and assume I'm weak. That's why they reject me." Ethan frowned, leaning forward. "That's their mistake. Strength isn't just about being big or powerful. It's about how you handle challenges, how you treat others. From what I've seen, you've got plenty of strength." Before Lyra could respond, a loud voice interrupted them. "Ah, Princess Lyra, and our guest from Earth." It was Lord Kale, one of the king's advisors. Tall and broad-shouldered, with sharp features and an even sharper tongue, Kale strode toward them with an air of arrogance. Behind him trailed several nobles, their faces smug as they watched Ethan and Lyra together. "Lord Kale," Lyra said, coolly standing up. "Is there something you need?" Kale smirked, glancing briefly at Ethan before focusing on Lyra. "I was simply wondering how long we intend to entertain this farmer from Earth. Surely he must realize he has little chance of winning your favor." Ethan stood as well, his jaw tightening. "I didn't come here to win anyone's favor," he said firmly. "I came because I wanted to see your world and meet its people. If that's not good enough for you, then maybe I should leave." "No!" Lyra said quickly, stepping between them. Her voice softened as she turned to Ethan. "Please don't go, not because of him." Kyle raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "How touching. But tell me, Princess, do you truly believe this human is worthy of your attention? Does he possess the qualities needed to stand by your side as ruler of Luminara?" Lyra hesitated, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. Before she could answer, King Varric appeared, flanked by guards. His expression was stern as he addressed Kale. "Enough of this nonsense. If you doubt Ethan's worth, then let us settle the matter fairly. All suitors who wish to court my daughter must prove themselves through trials of strength, skill, and wisdom. Let us see if Ethan is truly unworthy." The crowd murmured in agreement and Kyle's smirk widened. "Very well," he said. "Let the trials begin." The first trial took place in the palace courtyard, where a massive stone, carved with ancient runes, sat in the center of a wide arena. The task was simple: lift the stone and carry it across the courtyard. Many of the suitors attempted it, straining against the weight until their muscles burned. Some managed to lift it briefly, but none could carry it far. When it was Ethan's turn, he stepped forward, studying the stone carefully. Though he wasn't used to such displays of physical strength, he had spent years working on his farm, hauling heavy loads and building sturdy fences. Taking a deep breath, he gripped the stone and lifted it with surprising ease. The crowd gasped as he carried it across the courtyard, setting it down gently on the other side. "Well done," King Varric said, nodding approvingly. Even Kale looked impressed, though he quickly masked it with a scowl. The second trial was a race through treacherous terrain outside the palace walls. The path twisted through jagged cliffs and dense forests, requiring both speed and agility. Ethan ran alongside the other suitors, keeping pace despite the uneven ground. But halfway through, disaster struck. He slipped on loose gravel and tumbled down a steep slope, landing hard on the rocky ground below. Pain shot through his leg, and for a moment, Ethan thought he might have to give up. Then he heard a voice, calling his name. Looking up, he saw Lyra climbing down toward him, her movements quick and sure. She reached him moments later, crouching beside him. "Are you hurt?" she asked, concern etched on her face. "I'll be fine," Ethan said through gritted teeth. "But I don't think I can finish the race." "Yes, you can," Lyra insisted. She pointed to a narrow ledge winding along the cliffside. Follow that path. It leads back to the trail. Trust me. With Lyra's guidance, Ethan hobbled to the ledge and continued the race, gritting his teeth against the pain. By the time he crossed the finish line, he was exhausted but triumphant. The crowd cheered, and Lyra rushed to his side, helping him. "Steady himself, you did it," she said, her voice filled with pride. "You didn't give up." Ethan grinned weakly. "Couldn't let you down." The final trial was the most challenging of all. Inside the palace library, a sacred artifact lay locked within a crystal case. To unlock it, the suitors had to solve a complex puzzle using clues hidden throughout the room. One by one, they tried and failed, growing frustrated as time ticked away. When it was Lyra's turn, she stepped forward confidently. Though the puzzle stumped many, Lyra moved with purpose, piecing together the clues with remarkable speed. When she finally unlocked the case, revealing the glowing artifact inside, the crowd erupted in applause. Even Ethan couldn't help but cheer, grinning as he watched Lyra bask in the admiration she so richly deserved. As the trials concluded, Ethan realized something important. These tests weren't just about proving strength or skill, they were about showing character. And through every challenge, Lyra had demonstrated qualities far greater than physical power: intelligence, determination, and kindness. For the first time, Ethan understood why King Varric had invited him to Luminara. It wasn't just about finding a suitor for Lyra. It was about helping her see her own worth. And as Ethan stood beside her, watching the joy on her face, he knew he'd made the right decision in coming. The applause from the final trial echoed through the palace halls, but it wasn't enough to silence the whispers of doubt that still lingered among some of the nobles. Lord Kale, in particular, refused to accept Lyra's success or Ethan's growing bond with her. As the crowd dispersed, he stood near the edge of the room, his arms crossed and his lips curled into a sneer. To him, Lyra was still too small, too weak to rule, and Ethan, a mere farmer from Earth, was an insult to their traditions. He couldn't let this go unchallenged. That evening, during a private meeting with King Varric, Kale made his move. "Your Majesty," he began, his tone dripping with false respect, "I must speak plainly. These trials were meant to test the worthiness of suitors, yet we have allowed a human, an outsider, to participate. Worse, Princess Lyra herself has been coddled and protected throughout. Is this truly how we choose our future queen?" Varric's expression darkened. Lyra proved herself today, as did Ethan. Their actions spoke louder than any words. Kyle shook his head, leaning forward. "Actions. Lifting stones and solving puzzles are games, not true tests of strength. If we allow this farce to continue, what message does it send to our people? That size and power mean nothing? That anyone can rule regardless of ability?" Though Kale's words stung, Varric remained calm. "My daughter has shown wisdom, courage, and leadership. Those are the qualities needed to lead. But if you doubt her, then perhaps another challenge is in order." Kale's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "A duel," he said firmly. "Energy blades, one-on-one combat. Let us see if Princess Lyra can truly hold her own, or if she needs her human friend to save her again." When news of the duel reached Lyra, she felt a wave of panic wash over her. She had trained with energy blades since childhood, learning the art of precision and grace. But facing Kale, a seasoned warrior nearly twice her height, felt like an impossible task. Still, she knew refusing would only confirm the doubts others had about her. She couldn't back down. Ethan found her later that night in the training grounds, practicing her moves under the light of the twin moons. Her strikes were quick and fluid, but her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the hilt of the blade. When she noticed him watching, she lowered the weapon and sighed. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Kale is stronger, faster. Everyone will see me fail." Ethan stepped closer, his expression serious. "You're not going to fail. You've already proven you're stronger than they think. This isn't about beating Kale, it's about showing them who you really are." "But what if that's not enough?" Lyra asked, frustration creeping into her tone. "What if they never see me as more than small?" Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch steady and reassuring. Then let me remind you of something. Strength isn't just about being bigger or hitting harder. It's about standing up when it feels easier to give up. And you've done that every single day, even when no one believed in you. Lyra looked at him, her glowing eyes searching his face. For a moment she felt a flicker of hope, not because she thought she could win, but because someone finally saw her for who she was. The day of the duel arrived, and the entire court gathered in the arena. The air buzzed with anticipation as Lyra and Kale faced each other, their energy blades humming softly. Kale towered over her, his stance confident and mocking. "Are you ready, little princess?" he taunted, raising his blade. "Or shall I make this quick?" Lyra didn't respond. Instead, she focused on her breathing, steadying herself as she gripped her weapon tightly. The duel began with a clash of blades, sparks flying as metal met energy. Kyle swung with brute force, each strike aimed to overwhelm her. Lyra dodged and parried, using her smaller size to her advantage. She moved swiftly, staying just out of reach while looking for openings in his defense. But Kyle was relentless. His attacks came faster, forcing Lyra to retreat step by step. The crowd murmured, nervously sensing her struggle. Just as it seemed Kale might land a decisive blow, Ethan stepped forward from the sidelines. "Enough!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the tension. Before anyone could stop him, he rushed into the arena and grabbed Kale's arm mid-swing, halting the attack. The crowd gasped as Ethan twisted Kale's wrist, causing him to drop his blade. Then, without hesitation, Ethan picked up the weapon and handed it to Lyra. "This is your fight," he said firmly, meeting her gaze. "Finish it." For a moment, Lyra hesitated, unsure if she should take the blade. But as she looked at Ethan, she saw trust and belief in his eyes. Belief in her. Taking a deep breath, she accepted the weapon and turned back to Kale. Now, instead of fear, determination burned within her. With renewed focus, Lyra pressed her advantage. She struck quickly and precisely, aiming for Kale's weak points. Each movement was calculated, each step deliberate. Finally, with a swift motion, she disarmed him completely, leaving him defenseless. The crowd erupted into cheers, stunned by what they had witnessed. Kale stumbled back, his face red with anger and humiliation. "This is a trick," he snarled. "She couldn't have beaten me on her own." "She didn't need tricks," Ethan replied calmly, his voice carrying across the arena. "She beat you with skill, strategy, and heart, something you clearly lack." As the reality sank in, the nobles began to clap, their applause growing louder as they realized the truth. Lyra was no fragile princess. She was a leader, capable, and strong in ways they had failed to see. Later that evening, Lyra sat alone in the palace garden, staring up at the stars. The events of the day replayed in her mind: the duel, Kale's defeat, and most importantly, Ethan's unwavering support. She hadn't expected anyone to stand by her side so fiercely, especially not someone like him. Slowly, she began to understand that strength wasn't something she had to prove to others. It was something she carried within herself all along. Ethan joined her moments later, sitting quietly beside her. Neither spoke for a while, content to share the peaceful silence. Finally, Lyra broke the quiet. "Thank you," she said softly. "For believing in me." Ethan smiled. "I didn't do anything special. You're the one who fought and won." Lyra shook her head. "You gave me the chance to show everyone what I'm capable of. Without you, I might have given up." "Well," Ethan said, his tone light but sincere, "maybe we make a good team." Lyra turned to look at him, her glowing eyes meeting his. There was warmth in her expression now, a softness that hadn't been there before. "Maybe we do." In that moment, surrounded by the beauty of Luminara and the promise of a brighter future, Lyra felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Hope. Hope that she could be more than the sum of others' expectations. Hope that she might find love, not because of her title or her appearance, but because of who she truly was. The days following the duel passed quickly, filled with celebrations and newfound respect for Princess Lyra. The people of Luminara, once quick to dismiss her due to her size, now saw her in a different light. Stories of her skill and bravery spread through the kingdom, painting her not as a fragile ruler but as a leader who could hold her own against even the fiercest opponents. Ethan's role in the events had not gone unnoticed either. His actions during the duel, stopping Kale's aggression and empowering Lyra to finish the fight, earned him admiration from many. For the first time in years, Lyra felt truly seen. Ethan, too, found himself changing. When he had first arrived on Luminara, he'd been an outsider, unsure of his place in this strange and beautiful world. But as he spent more time with Lyra, learning about her struggles and witnessing her strength, he began to feel like he belonged. He admired her resilience, her kindness, and the quiet determination that burned within her. Slowly, without either of them realizing it at first, their bond deepened. What started as friendship began to blossom into something more. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting the palace gardens in shades of gold and purple, Ethan and Lyra walked together along a path lined with glowing flowers. The air was cool and fragrant, carrying the faint hum of insects and the rustle of leaves. They spoke little, comfortable in each other's presence, until Lyra stopped suddenly and turned to face him. "Ethan," she said, her voice soft but steady. "I need to ask you something." Ethan frowned slightly, concerned by the seriousness in her tone. "What is it?" Lyra hesitated, her glowing eyes searching his face. Do you think I'm ready to rule? Not just because of what happened with Kale, but truly ready?" Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he thought carefully about his response. "I think you've always been ready," he said finally. "You just needed to believe it yourself. And honestly, I don't think anyone else could handle all this." He gestured vaguely to the palace and the kingdom beyond, with as much grace and heart as you do. Lyra looked down, her silver skin catching the fading light. "It's hard sometimes," she admitted. "People expect so much from me, and I'm afraid I'll disappoint them." "You won't," Ethan said firmly. "Because you care. You listen. You fight for what's right. Those are the things that make a good leader, not how tall you are or how strong you look." For a moment, Lyra simply stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face, a genuine, radiant smile that lit up her entire being. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." As weeks turned into months, Ethan became a permanent fixture in the palace. He worked alongside Lyra, helping her prepare for her eventual ascension to the throne. Together, they visited villages across Luminara, listening to the concerns of its people and finding ways to improve their lives. Ethan's practical knowledge of farming and resource management proved invaluable, while Lyra's wisdom and empathy ensured that no one felt overlooked. Their partnership was seamless, a perfect balance of strengths that complemented each other. King Varric watched these developments with pride. He had hoped Ethan's arrival would bring change, but he hadn't anticipated how deeply the two would connect. Seeing his daughter happy and confident for the first time in years filled him with relief. One afternoon, as he sat in his observatory gazing at the stars, Varric reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The decision to invite Ethan had been risky, perhaps even reckless, but it had paid off in ways he couldn't have imagined. Meanwhile, Lord Kale kept his distance, nursing his wounded pride. Though he still harbored resentment toward Lyra and Ethan, he knew better than to challenge them openly again. The court had rallied behind Lyra, and any attempt to undermine her would only damage his reputation further. Reluctantly, he accepted his place as an advisor, though his contributions were minimal compared to before. One crisp morning, as the palace awoke to the sound of birdsong, preparations began for a special ceremony. Word had spread throughout the kingdom that Princess Lyra and Ethan Harper intended to announce their engagement. The news sparked excitement among the citizens who had grown fond of the unlikely pair. Decorations adorned every corner of the palace, shimmering banners hanging between crystal spires and flower petals scattered across marble floors. On the day of the announcement, the grand hall overflowed with guests. Nobles, villagers, and dignitaries from neighboring planets gathered to witness the historic event. Lyra wore a gown woven from threads that seemed to capture starlight itself, the fabric flowing around her like liquid silver. Her hair was braided with tiny gems that sparkled with each movement. Beside her stood Ethan, dressed in ceremonial robes gifted by the royal family. Though his height made him stand out among the crowd, there was no arrogance in his posture, only humility and gratitude. When the time came, King Varric stepped forward to address the assembly. His voice rang clear and proud as he spoke of Lyra's journey, her trials and her triumphs. Today, he concluded, we celebrate not just a union between two individuals, but a promise of unity between worlds. May their love guide us toward a brighter future. As applause filled the hall, Lyra and Ethan exchanged vows, promising to stand by each other through joy and hardship. Their words were simple yet heartfelt, reflecting the bond they had built over time. When they sealed their promise with a kiss, the room erupted into cheers, the sound echoing through the palace like music. In the days that followed, life on Luminara continued much as it always had, but with a renewed sense of hope. Lyra embraced her role as heir to the throne with confidence, knowing she had Ethan's support. Together, they worked tirelessly to ensure the prosperity of their people, tackling challenges with creativity and compassion. Under their leadership, Luminara flourished, becoming a beacon of peace and progress in the galaxy. For Ethan, life on the alien planet was a far cry from the quiet farm he'd left behind. Yet he couldn't imagine being anywhere else. Every sunrise painted the landscape in colors he'd never dreamed of, and every interaction with its people reminded him of the beauty of connection. Most importantly, he had found someone who understood him, not perfectly but deeply, and who loved him for exactly who he was. As for Lyra, she finally understood what it meant to be strong. It wasn't about proving herself to others, it was about staying true to her values and trusting in her abilities. With Ethan by her side, she faced the future unafraid, ready to lead her kingdom with wisdom and courage. And so, under the watchful glow of twin moons, the story of the tiny alien princess and the human farmer became legend. A tale of love, acceptance, and the power of seeing beyond appearances. On Luminara, where rivers sparkled and trees shimmered, their bond served as a reminder that even the smallest light can shine brightest when given the chance.